I wrote down some quotes that I heard over the course of the day that I found to be particularly poignant and inspiring. So I just wanted to first share those with you all. And I also, during after the lunch and the coffee break, I also asked a number of researchers and students and teachers about what their takeaways and insights have been from the day today. So I also wanted to share those with you. And then I can share a little bit about my own experience and how it relates to this topic. And then lastly, I prepared some discussion questions that I welcome everyone to join and share your perspectives. So I made a list here. I think there are about 8 quotes here that I heard. So we started off with the vice president who joined us in the very beginning, and he mentioned things like mutual understanding, cross-border learning and collaboration. And then I heard beauty and seriousness. Storytelling is not just an art, it is a way to restore the truth. Accept that you will have misunderstandings. Stay open and be curious. And from one of our colleagues yesterday at the panel shared, everyone wants to be seen. And so these really stood out to me and I think really capture the essence of belonging that we've been talking about and that we've seen through various projects and presentations today. And so when I asked a handful of you what your impressions were of the day and what insights have stayed with you, I think it's a nice summary that touches on some of the projects that we saw today. So one person shared that diversity is not just about checking a box or another world over there. It's important to have a lot of different voices, and those others are not wrong. It's important to do research like this, especially when funding can be hard, when we are including and highlighting minoritized voices, and that when we do big survey data, right, that is focused on numbers and quantitative methods, for us to remember that real people are behind these numbers and there are real stories that these numbers represent. One person also shared, I am inspired by the indigenous illustration storytelling, particularly to consider the importance of telling their own history from their point of view and not just from the Han perspective. Another person shared that they appreciated the change in perspective of how autism and loneliness was conveyed, and that it can be looked at in the way that we saw presented this morning and considered differently than traditionally represented in our dominant narrative storytelling. Another person shared that they felt inspired that diversity is being discussed more and more, that there's a need to continue to include in all of our agendas, whether it's the classrooms or in our communities, with our friendships, with our families, and that we need to be able to merge diversity in many arenas of our lives. Another person shared that they really appreciated the importance of considering the environment, and that before the workshop they had never thought about this, and really we had only focused on fixing others and putting the burden on the individual. And that this is something I think that also was discussed yesterday in the panel, that the importance of making structural changes and not just burdening individuals. And then lastly, someone shared that they're really feeling inspired to take action and are leaving here with a lot of different ideas about how they can make impacts in their communities. So thank you for those who shared that with me. I think one of the big takeaways for me when I think about the work that folks in here are doing is that we are talking about collaborations among different disciplines, right? Whether it's like computer engineering, education, psychology, but we're also now in a room cross-culturally. I'm American, but I've been living in the Netherlands for, this is going on now my 8th year. And we all bring different identities, right, into who we are, into our work, whether when we leave home, we go into our workplaces and into our communities. And one of the main things I think that I hear, that I see, experience in these different projects and research is this idea of trust. And if you think for a second, what does trust actually mean to you? Because when we are merging, when we're starting to collaborate with people, when we have differences, and we're coming together on similarities to work together, trust is such a huge point, right? How do we start something from nothing? It is taking the time and the patience to develop that trust. And so if you were to really define what trust means, how would you explain that? And I think so often we're so quick to say, I don't trust this person or I trust them. Sometimes it's a feeling for us. But I really love there's an acronym from a social work scholar who's done a variety of qualitative interviews. And what she's found is that trust is broken down into this acronym called BRAVING. And B stands for boundaries. So when I'm working in a team with somebody else and we're wanting to come together on something, particularly around if it's people where we have differences, right? And we're coming together on a shared mission. So it's first getting clear about our boundaries, right? And boundaries are not a way to control somebody else, but I love the idea that boundaries are saying like, okay, for me to be able to keep showing up in this project, I need to be able to leave at 5 p.m. to go home to my children. R, reliability, so that we consistently are showing up and we're responding to emails and that we're saying, okay, I'm going to be here to work on this project with you. We're committed around these same goals and we consistently show up that way. A is accountability, so that if a mistake is made, I make amends for that. I recognize the consequences of something where I've made an error and being humble to say that, oh, okay, I've made this mistake. And when I think about my own projects as a researcher, when I'm working with community-based partners across different religions, across different countries, that one is so important, right? Is to be able to say, oh, I'm sorry I made this mistake, and be humble to admit that. And then V stands for vault. So this idea that I can keep a secret so that if there are things that are sensitive or as that we build this trust, that as we're working collaboratively, that we can trust one another because we're able to keep the secret. And then I, there are 3 more. I is integrity. So that's being honest with one another, so not making commitments or saying promises that we can't actually fulfill. And I think that's beautiful. We've heard earlier today the idea of finding the right skill set and all being honest and having open conversations about what can I bring to the table and being honest about what our own limitations are and also what we're going to commit to in this way that's full of integrity. And then N is non-judgment, so that we recognize that we're all coming from different perspectives, and if something seems strange or weird to us at first, that we pause and we self-reflect to understand, why is it that I'm having this reaction, right? Because we also know it is human to be judgmental, but judgment actually is a survival mechanism that tells us like, oh, is something off here? And when we're working with amongst differences, especially when there could be power dynamics, right? Is understanding, oh, what is this that I'm having this judgmental reaction to, and how can I actually self-reflect? And then the last one is G, which is generosity, so that we build trust through being generous with one another. And so that we're actually, if I think about this beautiful team, the 4 of us here that have been traveling together now, and Yingting also has been spending a lot of time with us since Wednesday. But all of us, I'm new to most of these folks here. And when you're waking up and seeing each other for breakfast and you're together all day long, being generous with people. And I really had to laugh the other day. I was talking, I won't name names, but I was talking with one of them. And we were hiking up this hill, and it's very humid, and we're on campus. And I think I asked one of them something, like, how are you? I'm very American in that way. And they were like, I can't talk right now. It's too hot. I have to just keep moving. And knowing and being generous to say, like, of course, that's okay. And they were setting their boundary with me, right? And not being offended because I wasn't offended. at all, but really appreciating the honesty, right? And allowing that person to also just be in their own space. So I think, I don't know if this is a nice moment to also think about trust and maybe segue a little bit to the idea of belonging and how these two ideas are connected. Do you want to? Yeah. So I thought before we kind of get into how do we move forward or thinking about this topic related to destigmatization and empowerment, I wondered if folks want to think about what does belonging mean to you. And when I think about my own experiences, for example, even just a simple example of being with these three, right? Like, my Dutch is not so great. Unfortunately, I wish I spoke better Dutch, and I've been in the Netherlands for a number of years now, and I feel belonging with them. They all are native Dutch speakers, and I feel belonging with them when they're speaking Dutch and I come up into a conversation, and right away they recognize me and they will switch to English. These are very simple things, right? That mean something and let me know that I'm a part of them, even though there are ways that I do not feel a part of them.